Hi everyone, Alexandra Jarrett, Jupiter Returns here with your weekly in-depth day-by-day forecast for the week of Monday the 4th to Sunday the 10th of May 2020. And we start the week with some pretty big news. What we have today, Monday the 4th, is the lunar nodes. The south node here has been moving through Cancer, has now ingressed into the sign of Gemini. And the opposite position, the south node there has moved into the sign of Sagittarius. I just want to use this opportunity, actually. Someone queried with me recently how they look like they're the same way up. Usually we're used to seeing the north node this way up and the south node this way up. And around the circle, they kind of end up looking like they're the same. But if we take the south node and move it all the way around, we can see that when they're next to each other, they are in fact opposites. So it's kind of a slight optical illusion. So just to clarify that point there about the nodes, thought that might be helpful. So the nodes of the moon have shifted into Gemini and Sagittarius. So this is pretty big news. The lunar nodes are these points in the sky, the points of fate and destiny and karma and these big energetic shifts that we get in our lives. So wherever in your chart these guys are moving through, the house in your chart that they occupy, that's where you're going to see kind of the most impactful life events take place. So when they change sign, they're going to spend around 18 months in these signs. The effect lasts, I usually say 18 months to 2 years, because there's kind of a period of blending when they're at either end of the sign that they're occupying. For example, we will have eclipses still in Cancer and Capricorn later on in the summer, even though the nodes have moved into different signs. So there is a slight kind of blending around as they move from one sign and into the next. So look in your own birth chart and find, this is a really good time actually, rather than just immediately jumping into, okay, what are they going to be doing? Where is Gemini in my chart? Where is Sagittarius in my chart? This is actually a really great time to just take stock of what they have been doing. So think back over the last 18 months, find Cancer and Capricorn in your chart and see what messages, what you can discern from the experience of both the north node and the south node moving through those areas of your chart. It can be a really, really good time. And often actually astrology is kind of better done when it's sort of, when we're looking at things with through the eyes of hindsight, and when we're saying, oh yeah, I can see when my north node hit this point, this kind of triggered this, and it can help us understand the effect of the points and the planets a little bit better. So go through that process if you can, and then also do have a look at where Gemini and Sagittarius land in your chart. If you've got personal planets like your sun and your moon or your Venus in those signs, if those signs occupy angular houses, particularly the rising sign, the ascendant, or if in fact you even have your own nodes in these signs, that's going to have more effect for you. So check out if there's anything you know, super personal and potent that's going to be happening for yourself. For example, I have my south node in Gemini. So when the north node comes up to that point, that will be something called my nodal opposition. So it's a kind of a reckoning time. Where have I got to on my balance with finding the midpoint, the sweet spot in the middle of the south node and the north node. So just a little taster of what the nodes are all about there in your chart. And if you need guidance with that, obviously do get in touch and book a reading with me, and I can help you understand that kind of stuff. So in general then, what we're going to see, and probably what we've already started seeing as I talk about with the blending, we've had the north node in Cancer, and as the north node has been completing the journey, the very end part of Cancer, we've had this kind of like an extreme version. North Node brings lots more of something to us, but also it can feel, there can be some resistance to that too. And Cancer is the sign of the home, the sign of the family, the sign of the feelings, and the place of nurture and care. And of course, you know, with the crisis that we're going through, as the South Node has been completing the journey through Capricorn, the very rational and practical world, the very, you know, patriarchal kind of energy. This is more matriarchal. And so we've seen, you know, this huge surge in focus towards our home, as we're all actually forced into our homes at the moment, you know, across the whole world. We're all spending time at home. We're working from home. We're broadcasting from home. That's nothing unusual for me, but for lots of people it is. And also there's been an increase in emotions, and an increase in the awareness of people's emotions, and their sensitivities, and the need for care. You know, our carers, the nurses, and people who work in our caring and nurturing fields have really been put into the spotlight for probably the first time in far too long, I would say. So now the North Node is bringing us more of Gemini and perhaps a little less of Sagittarius. So Sagittarius is all about the global picture. It's very big, very wide. So this is our long distance travel. Essentially, this pair of signs, this polarity of Sagittarius and Gemini, deal with education and travel. There's lots more to it, but those are the two kind of main things. So Sagittarius is your long distance travel, and it's your higher education, anything university and beyond. It's the really big stuff. Whereas Gemini is more local. It's more focused, it's more detailed. The education with Gemini is more about practical skills, something that I can actually use in my day-to-day life, in my organization of myself. And that there'll be an increase in everything that has more of a local flavor as we move away from the globalized kind of feel. You know, these huge corporations, I think we'll start to see more and more of those disappearing, and greater emphasis on local products, small businesses, people that are on my high street, or my neighbors and friends. You know, Gemini rules the neighborhood. It's the community that we're a part of. So there'll be a greater focus with the North Node there on our community, because it's not just this place where we go at the end of the day to get some sleep in between working and going off on our long holidays anymore. It's suddenly become so much more important. Our connection to our neighbors is so much more important. What our neighborhood looks like, what it feels like to be here and spend more time in our neighborhood is more important. You know, can we put a little bit more care and attention into that area, rather than kind of leaving it up to someone else to do? Lots more in terms of logistical things. So parcel deliveries, postal services, taxi services that operate locally, anything to do with buying and selling, so trading and exchanging things, happening on a more of a local basis. So local shops and local business people getting a real boost for the next 18 months or so, as the North Node moves through that area of the chart, and less so, you know, the big global brands, and the kind of the faceless, sizable kind of businesses. I think it's going to be a more tricky time for them, and that's probably something that we've needed for a little while. Gemini is more interested in the detail. So Gemini will read the instruction manual, whereas Sagittarius is just like, balls, let's just try it. Let's just see what happens. Kind of, it just wants to have an adventure, and it doesn't really, it's just optimistic. It's just, it'll be fine. You know, we don't need to worry about the practicalities and the details. Whereas Gemini is like, well, actually, you know, it's probably, it could save us a lot of trouble if we had a little bit more scrutiny. So There is going to be an increase in emphasis on information and learning and spreading information. So we're going to see a continuation of these, lots and lots of ideas moving around. But I think these are ideas that are now going to come under increased call for detail. So it's going to be a case of, well, I'm not just going to believe this grand idea or philosophy that you have. Actually, what's underpinning that? What's the details? I want to know how you've come to this conclusion. I want to see your workings, essentially. And that's something with my South Node in Gemini that I always try to do with my astrology. I always try to show my workings. It's not enough for me just to teach you and give you the message of what your chart holds. When I give a reading, I also like to show you how I've come to that conclusion, because I think there's so much to be gained in the detail. And detail is a real kind of topic for the whole of the week. So these are just some themes, and you will start to see what's cropping up in your own life depending on which houses these guys occupy. Gemini is we're moving deeper into the period of the year where Gemini is going to be an increased focus. So it's lively, it's changeable, it wants variety, it wants to learn new things, it wants to interact a lot more. So it's busy too. It's a good time to get things done. Great for writing, great for speaking, great for marketing, all these kinds of things, getting your face out there into the community, doing what you do, spreading the word in your local area about your business, that kind of thing can go really well now. So that's the real big news for Monday. And we also have some nice connection. We have a Libra moon, nice and balanced, making a harmonious aspect over to Saturn there in fellow Earth sign Aquarius. Nice trine aspect between those two planets, giving us quite a calm, grounded start to the week, which is very pleasant and probably a good time for concentration today. These are air signs, so it deals with the mind. So a good time to get a lot of work done if it involves using your mind. So then moving on to Tuesday, and the big news with Tuesday, actually, there's a couple of things happening. The sun is at the exact midpoint of the sign of Taurus. It's at 15 degrees of Taurus. What that means is that it's the point of Beltane. Now, you'll have seen, possibly if you've been on social media, lots and lots of posts about Beltane this weekend. Often it's celebrated on May the 1st or around that date. Essentially, these are inaccurate, these dates that people often celebrate these things. And accuracy, again, is going to be a Gemini theme. But it's where the natural wheel of the year has been kind of a little bit changed to suit our cultural needs. The Gregorian calendar is what we use, and so it's far easier to just say, okay, May the 1st every year, whatever is actually happening up there in the sky, we're not bothered about that kind of thing anymore. We'll just say Beltane falls on the 1st of May. Actually, Beltane falls when the sun is at the exact midpoint of Taurus. It's called a cross-quarter day. And this is the exact midpoint between the spring equinox and the summer solstice. So it's that middle point, and it's very, very important that it's precise. When these ceremonies and celebrations of the natural world were created, it was by people who were in tune with the natural rhythms of nature, which are guided by the planets above. They followed the solar cycle, they followed the lunar cycle, they followed Venus and Mercury. They knew what's happening down here is a reflection of what's happening up there. And you only have to spend some time around ancient cultures, things like Stonehenge, these ancient timepieces that were absolutely connected to the movement of the stars and planets. to understand how intricately, how deeply their lives were connected to these movements of time. And so Tuesday is the exact correct point of Beltane. And it's the beginning of summer. It's when mythologically the green man and the spring queen, the May queen, as she's referred to, they consummate their relationship. It's a very fertile time of feminine and masculine energies coming together. Lots of, Taurus is a Venus-ruled sign. It's very closely related to sensuality and pleasures of the flesh. And yes, it's a very, very abundant and fertile time. So there's an element of fertility, of creativity, of the natural world around in bucket loads on Tuesday. Also on that day, Mercury, the planet Mercury, will be exactly conjunct the Sun, giving an extra flavor to Beltane. Mercury being the ruler of Gemini, it's just giving us a bit more Gemini flavor. It's bringing a bit more flavor to our minds. It's awakening our minds. It's awakening our need to have more stimulation, more conversations, more interactions with people, lots and lots of mental activity, lots of talking, perhaps getting bored easily, perhaps feeling a little restless. I'm sure we've all got that going on anyway, but perhaps a little bit more so. So that could disrupt the sleep pattern as well, particularly with the moon growing in her strength as she's moving round. So potentially it could be a time when you want to take steps to help you have a good sleep. Journaling is absolutely the best thing that you can do before you go to sleep with a lot of Mercury energy around, even if it's just get everything that's going on in here down on paper and then I can actually properly sleep. If you need a lot of mental energy for your work or a project that you're embarking, it's a really great time now to plan things, to organize things, to get all the details done, get your ducks in a row, as it were, as we start to prepare to come out of lockdown, for example. You know, how's that going to look? What am I going to do? How am I going to need to be prepared to, move out of this one sort of phase of life and into the next? Really helpful for that kind of thing. Also good for tidying up, cleaning up, wanting to clean up yourself in some way, clean up your core energy, just wanting to sort of, just like almost have like a mental smudge in a way, if you use sage or something like that, just really wanting to sort of burn off the old with the sun's rays and just kind of gain some clarity again. And this will bring greater clarity to us. It could actually relate back to the time when the Sun and Mercury were together back during the retrograde phase, the last Mercury retrograde, which was in Pisces. This was back in the middle to the end of February. So we may now start to see that some things becoming resolved or having greater clarity around information that at that time seemed vague, confusing, overwhelming, this kind of thing, when Mercury is in Pisces. So we can get a little bit more, just some clarity around any issues that were particularly confusing at that time. So have a think back what was going on in your own life around that time of the Mercury retrograde, and things could be resolved. Clarity, insights, details gained, and that again, that's going to be a real feature of this week, just gaining insights, gaining clarity on matters, as we'll come to discuss. So then on Wednesday, Mercury's day, the moon will have finished up in Libra and move into the sign of Scorpio. And the moon here is really intensifying now. You can see she's almost at her full moon position, which she will actually achieve on Thursday, around about the middle of the day, around about noontime here in the UK. The full moon will be taking place at 17 degrees of Scorpio. So find that in your chart. If you have planets or angles around there, that's where you're going to be really gaining some potent information. The Mercury and the Sun will still be coupled up in Taurus in opposition to the moon, which is what we have at the full moon. It's an opposition. And so this can often play out through interactions with other people acting as the mirror that reflects back to us something about ourselves and our own inner world and our own personal journey. So it's a really good time to pay attention to the interactions or what crops up in conversation with other people. So yes, it's absolutely still, Mercury has a huge amount of influence here. So Mercury is all about the detail, and Scorpio is all about the hidden. It's the darker parts of ourselves that we don't sort of dare to go in there, really. It's the shadow side of us. And so when the moon goes in there, she's shining her light into the dark corners that we don't tend to look at very often. So we can get with Mercury there, don't forget the moon at the full moon is capturing the light of the sun. As the sun is infused with both the Taurus Venus kind of influence and the Mercury's, attention to detail, this is all being captured by that moon as she's, reflecting that light then into those dark corners of Scorpio. So there can be issues of self-worth, or where we're acting from a place where that's somewhat lacking. There can be issues around our values, our value system. There can be issues around certainly money. This is a financial axis here. Our connection to others, our intimacy, how much or how little intimacy we have, how much we share of ourselves, how much we share with other people. All these kinds of issues can be shown up. And it's a really beautiful full moon. If we're trying to gain some access to the hidden realms of ourselves, but also it's a wonderful energy for contacting other fields. If you're a psychic, if you practice any of the arts like clairvoyance, mediumship, if you like to contact, moving through meditation, for example, with source, there's a beautiful trine aspect, easy flow of energy after. So it's an applying aspect. So just after the full moon, she will meet this connection with Neptune there in Pisces. So this is really tapping into the spiritual realm. And you may find that you're incredibly intuitive. Really trust your intuition around this full moon. It's really going to put you in touch with that part of yourself. These are the water signs. We say, I've got a feeling in my waters. And we do that for a reason, The moon moves bodies of water. She moves the tides of the oceans. And equally, we have so much water in us. And so that's what stirs us up around the full moon as well, just like it does with the tides. And Neptune, ruler of the oceans, Poseidon, he's also known as Pisces, lots of watery. So those intuitive kind of connections and feelings with, I just know something. And what that's going to help is, so we have a sextile then going on from the Sun and Mercury into Neptune. So we have this wonderful triangle between these planets. So if you're really trying to gain some insight, if it's from yourself, if you know you've buried something deep down inside and you need to just go back there just to clarify something or bring it into the light and bring some healing to it. Mercury is a planet of health and healing, or bringing some greater understanding to that issue. This is a great time, and it could just happen. It could just come up to the surface. So it's a beautiful full moon for just having a breakthrough moment of understanding something about your emotional world, or your family, you know, your family upbringing, or your own emotional kind of program that you're running, that's sort of put into us in our early years, in our background, that the moon being our, you know, a mothering experience, the family, the home. So, you know, those kinds of issues. So I think there'll be lots and lots of insight to be gained around this, and it's something that I would just trust your feelings around this time. Then moving on towards the end of the week, on Friday the 8th and then into Saturday the 9th, we then have Mercury moving on a little bit from the Sun and starting to build a wonderful trine aspect again, this time to the Pluto and Jupiter conjunction in Capricorn. So Mercury is at this point building in. Pluto being the ruler of Scorpio, it's really going to continue this work. So it's a really, really rich period of time, really, really deep few days of inner exploration. So Mercury trining with Pluto, we might reveal some secrets, or something might come up to the surface from the deep, from the depths, and into our understanding. And it's a really good time, for example, to embark on some kind of psychological therapeutic work at this time. That could, whatever that involves, whether it be a talk therapy, whether it be something written, you know, anything involving the mind and the mouth, essentially. Just kind of a lovely harmonious flow of energy there. With Pluto coupled up with Jupiter as well, Jupiter's energy is really giving us some wisdom. Yeah, it's kind of like this mature, warm wisdom that kind of gives us a hug about the situation. It's moving us into our higher self. So any kind of therapeutic work that you might be doing, whether that's with someone or just reading, you know, reading a self-help book, be fantastic around this time, or watching something on YouTube like this video, or you know, something with more of a psychological kind of healing aspect to it. This can be really, really great time with Jupiter's influence there into the mix, kind of assisting to bring the real benefits of that into being. And that will progress even more when the moon moves into Sagittarius on Saturday, because Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. So there's just a little bit more of the Jupiterian feel that's available to us. So yeah, some fantastic opportunities there to do some self-work. Then on the final day of this week, Saturday, is quite a big moment. We have Saturn there. Sorry, this is on Sunday. Saturday is Saturn's day. Saturn will be turning retrograde at this point. So as I've mentioned in the past, I seem to have lost my retrograde Saturn. As I've mentioned in the past, when planets station either to go retrograde or to go direct, it's a real intensification of their energy. So in the days building up to Saturn stationing retrograde, we can feel a lot more Saturn's energy, which is restrictions and boundaries and blockages and contraction. Whereas Jupiter likes to expand things, Saturn is more of a contracting, it's more of a solitary kind of fellow. Prefers to work on its own, prefers to be on it. Like if you've got your moon in, connected to Saturn, you tend to like to be on your own, or you feel alone. So Saturn is more solitary. So obviously when Saturn moved into Aquarius, this is when, certainly here in the UK, we had the social distancing, Aquarius being social. We had the lockdown, essentially. And it was helped as well by the fact that Mars was there as well. So it was this impingement of personal freedom in society, Mars being the personal, being the me. And Saturn saying, well, it's not about you right now, it's about the community, and so your will is going to have to be curtailed right now. Now, Mars has moved quite some distance from Saturn, but they're still in the same sign. So things are starting to feel like they're moving in the right direction, and we're hearing talk of the lockdown being lifted. I think it will be when Saturn turns retrograde to move back out of Aquarius and return to Capricorn, that we'll see that talk being put into action. Okay, Saturn likes something to be tangible and real, doesn't like just a theory. So at the moment, certainly in the UK, there's lots of theories about when and how the easing of the lockdown might happen. And I think as we approach the beginning of next week, with Saturn retrograding, Saturn stationing to go retrograde, this will be when we start to see the reality of what that's going to look like and how that's going to happen. And then basically it's going to take a couple of months for Saturn to retrace the ground that it's covered in Aquarius since it ingressed into that sign, before heading back into Capricorn at the end of June, and recovering the ground at the final degrees of Capricorn, which we know is where all of this crisis kind of was born, essentially. So we're going to be having a revisit to that with a slightly different set of eyes. When I talk about retrogrades, there's always so much attention on just the middle part, just the bit where the planet is going retrograde. But I always use the whole of that transit. So it's 3 phases. It's the pre-retrograde shadow, then it's the retrograde, then it's the post-retrograde shadow. And each of those 3 stages are very distinct. So the first phase, when the planet is moving over that area of your chart, so let's say from 24 degrees of Capricorn to 1 or 2 degrees of Aquarius, those few degrees, it's really just opening things up. It's just bringing our attention to that area of life and saying something important is happening here, okay? Stirring things up and making things come to the surface. It's not until Saturn turns retrograde and covers that ground again that things generally, that's when things start to get the most active and most bumpy. So this is when we'll start to see what Saturn's been up to, really. And then when it's gone over those bumps, it goes direct again and it smooths things out. It's like, okay, I see what it was all about, and now we can rectify things, put things right, put things straight, and move forward again. So there's lots more to come with Saturn. Saturn won't move completely out of Capricorns. It won't have completely finished the work there until right at the end of this year. So Saturn, Jupiter and Pluto are all going to still be very, very active in the latter stages of Capricorn between now and next December. So lots more to come. So hope that's helpful for you. Have a wonderful week of really getting into the nitty gritty. And I would recommend a part of that being just having a retrospective look at what the nodes have been up to for you, and the themes around what they may have in store for you for the next 18 months to 2 years. I would like to, just before I finish, invite you to, as always, like, share, comment, give me some support, and make sure you subscribe to my channel. But also, if you have any questions, I would like to, Gemini energy is very curious and it wants to know and it wants to learn. So in view of the North Node moving into Gemini, I would like to give you the invitation that 1 question per week in my astrology forecast now. I'll be picking a question at random to answer. So if you have any burning questions that you'd like to know about astrology, then please pop them in the comments or send me a message or something, get that through to me. And then, as I say, at the beginning of each forecast, I will provide the answer to you. I hope that's something that's of interest to you. As always, have a really wonderful, insightful, deep week, and I will see you again next Monday. Thanks a lot. Lots of love. Bye-bye.